Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Washington back for the 236th, count 'em, 236th Green Grassroots Emergency Protection Coalition Zoom call, the GREEP. You can see my classroom in the background. If you're with us on video, we've got 50 people with us, and we have a ton of stuff to talk about. As always, next week we will not be meeting. It'll be Labor Day, and my one of my daughters is almost in labor. But so we'll be taking off next week. But this week, God, we have a ton. In the age of Trump, there's never a dull moment, that's for sure. We are going to start with our poem from our great poet laureate, Mimi German. Mayor Heidi, America's mayor, is going to give us a report from Waldport, Oregon, America's last democracy. And then we are going to be joined by John Brakey and Ken Bennett from Arizona to go into the deep weeds on the battle over democracy in Arizona, which is really, really powerful and very much at the forefront of what's going on in this country. We're also going to be joined by Sam Saltman, son of David, to talk with us about the Ninth and Tenth Amendments and where this stands in terms of gerrymandering, sending troops from one state into another state, which is really pretty much unprecedented in American history. And I will say that today, Donald Trump denied that he's a dictator, but says that a lot of people are asking for one. So we'll leave it at that for the time being, but we will come to it. I also want to point out, by the way, that ICE, the ICE, which is the new Gestapo for immigration, also stands for Internal Combustion Engine, and I don't think that's an accident. So anyway, let's rock and roll here. We have our great poet laureate, Mimi German. Mimi, you obviously just had your hair done. And if you will, read us one of your. Well,
That's so fun.
so did
I,
I.
I,
If you'll just read, but you have real teeth. Let's hear one of your great poems, please, and then we'll go to Mayor Heidi, and then to John Brakey and Ken Bennett.
it's funny, Sluggo. I always come in from like just being out in the fields for this. So I do want to say one thing, and that is that my heart goes out to friends of mine and everyone else who is in Sisters, Oregon, who have lost their houses and
Yeah.
perhaps animals and the like. The fire is devastating, and two very good friends of mine did lose their house yesterday.
Oh,
And
God.
yeah, yeah, but they're okay, and so is their dog. So there's that. So finding things to be grateful for. This is a poem from my book, Where Grasses Bend, and it's called In America the Beautiful. The water's dirty, man. You know what I mean? The stench not even a mother could pretend to love. Like swill in the swale of a beached and bloated whale. A cistern of stink, like the sow of a politician let loose in a sty of flies. Yeah, the water's dirty, all right. Too dark to see reflection in the old gully where love, like bark, peels from its tree, abandoned in a sandbox near the liquor store dumpster.
The liquor store dumpster, I know that place. I think that's where the Democratic and Republican National Committees meet. Thank you for that, Mimi. I much appreciated that.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mimi German. We're going to go to Mayor Heidi in a minute. I do want to briefly note the passing of someone who was a real pioneer. I met him once. His name was Richard Lee. He was the founder of Oaksterdam University in Oakland, California, which was devoted to the science of raising marijuana. And, way back when, this was unheard of. And he just kind of got it going on a shoestring. And many, many thousands of people have actually passed through Oaksterdam University. I don't know if anybody else on the call here has ever heard of it, but I went and visited him. The cannabis Julie Levine says a friend of hers went. They did give diplomas that you could then roll up and smoke. So it was pioneering in that respect. So Richard Lee was quite a pioneer. He was busted, ridiculous that they busted him. There he is. He was only 62. He was in a wheelchair from an accident that was at a rock concert. He did lighting. I can't remember which band it was, but he was a lighting engineer, and he fell and wound up in a wheelchair. And to deal with the pain, he started smoking pot, and he developed some strains, revolutionary strains of marijuana of his own, and then just had this great idea to do a university, and nobody thought it would go anywhere. But it had a very, very large, very successful history, and I think it's still going. So, Richard Lee, we will miss you. Thank you for your powerful innovations and great brilliance. Your life was meaningful and greatly appreciated. Thank you again. Here's another one whose life is greatly appreciated, Mayor HEIDI LAMPERT of Waldport, Oregon. We have HEIDI on every week or whenever she's available to highlight the real struggle for democracy in this country. Mayor HEIDI was duly elected mayor last fall of this small town on the coast of Oregon, and has run up. Well, Mayor, they tried to get rid of, basically tried to lynch you, and you now well, the town of Waldport is in a campaign to recall these six city councilors and the city manager. Can you give us an update, please? And then we'll go to John Brakey and Ken Bennett in Arizona, and then to
Yeah,
Sam Saltman. Go ahead, Mayor.
yeah. Thanks, Sluggo. I just want to say for Mr. Lee, what a thing to be followed by, to follow, because he was such an outlaw, right? Such an outlaw that changed the world and changed how we think of medicine and healing. So what an honor to have a moment to think of him and his passing. But I want to just share with America, the struggle in Little America is very real. As mayor, and my plea is for everyone, if you can't run for election, to at least pay attention to what's going on in your city halls. I personally have a city manager who's a paid employee who's campaigning against me, and he's trying to convince my little town that I'm up to malice and sinister ways, when really I'm really just trying to run a city and be a mayor. So yeah, it's been really wild. I've been trying to work with my council, and they keep saying they're working with me, but they won't work with me. And so I really don't know how else to do this without the involvement of citizens. And that's why I ask everybody to get involved in their local politics.
Well, the question I have is, when will Donald Trump send the National Guard into Waldport?
Right. Or when will any police see the crimes being committed in Waldport? I mean, it's interesting because the narrative is that I'm the criminal. And, when you work in trauma and survivors, often people project what they're doing on other people. So now I'm starting to wonder, what is my city manager doing that he is so convinced that I'm up to wrongdoing? Why can't we just all be community and sit at the table and work together?
Well, maybe you will one of these days. I have to say this. I know this sounds far afield, and it probably is, but there's a series on Netflix called Titans. And it's kind of it's all right, but I mean it's interesting, and it's about the barons of Wall Street, the robber barons, after the Civil War to World War One, which was my original focus in my first history book, and there was a moment where J.P. Morgan, who was the biggest banker in America, was fighting a guy named Jacob Schiff, who was actually Jewish, who tried to take over one of Morgan's railroads. And he actually told Morgan he was going to do it, and Morgan said, go ahead. And then in the middle of it, Morgan realized that this would have changed the balance of the railroads in America. And they got into a war, two Tyrannosaurus Rexes. They're battering each other, and it brought down the American economy. And the whole country was in a total uproar. And Schiff and Morgan, who were sworn enemies by this time, actually sat down and got together and worked out a deal between the two of them that saved the country from going into a depression. It would be like Elon Musk and Ivan Boesky sitting down, two just total money crazed, power crazed barons. And it's hard to imagine anybody doing that today. Any of these, Trump sitting down and having any kind of rational discussion with a rivalry, with a rival of his, as opposed to sending in the FBI. But they
Yeah.
actually did this in 1901. It was quite an amazing moment in American history. So I can't imagine you and the city manager sitting down, but
No,
uh,
we're 6 months and an arrest past that. After he arrested me, um, it made it really clear that I couldn't trust him. And then it's not that it's about trust, right? In politics, we're not supposed to necessarily trust each other, but it's about like a civility. And I feel like as a culture, we've lost civility with one another. That ability to sit down at the same table with each other and disagree in civil ways and in respectful ways, and instead it's become a lot of name calling and a lot of accusations and just smears, just like really gross, ugly smears, which is a
right.
lot we're seeing on a national level. So
Well, I will say that Morgan did lie to Jacob Schiff, but they had no choice to get past it because they were destroying the economy and people were not going to stand for it. I will also say I cannot. I'm having a. I was really staggered by this today. I met a guy who's a professor, and then I watched him sit down on a lawn chair to read a book. And the title of the book, and I'm staggered by this. The title of the book was Against Empathy. And I've seen this before. This is a top-selling book. How in God's name, literally, can you be against empathy? If anybody can explain that, raise your hand and we'll talk about it. To me, empathy is what distinguishes humans from other beings. But who am I to say? I don't know. We got 81 people with us. We got John Brakey and Ken Bennett. If we can take some hands before we get you, that would be great. Do you mind? I got 4 people with hands up. Okay, good. MICKI LEADER, then LYNN FEINERMAN, DOROTHY REIK, and Steve Caruso, our engineer. MICKI, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Good. I'm very happy I got the notice for this in time this time. Um, every time originally I was talking about, I was very worried we're not going to have elections because Trump and his minions were going to get a way to keep us out. And we were doing enormous amounts of work attempting to get our state legislatures to not use the ES&S. Is that the name of the
Yeah, there's the SNS and then Dominion. John
right,
Brakey was
right,
all about
right,
these machines.
right. And you can't get anybody to pay attention to you. And Allegra and Julie were writing letter after letter after letter. I was writing letters, but I'm like a grain of sand compared to them. And all of a sudden, we're seeing everything is turned upside down. My husband, who is beside himself with watching this, says, we're not going to have elections. He's setting the stage, creating non existent problems in cities. Yes, we need to get our money back that they took the billions away from policing and for, doing all kinds of
Okay.
preventative. But he's setting the stage to turn around and say, it's a state of emergency and I'm suspending everything and there'll be no elections. It's
Yes.
just a frightening. It's like
Right.
I'm in a nightmare. I wake up in the middle of the day in a nightmare, you
Well,
know?
yeah, it's called, there is a term phrase for it. It's called burning the Reichstag. And we know when the moment comes that will happen. So part of the mission of these calls is
Hey,
to prepare us. Thank
Sluggo,
you, Mickey. Lynn,
Sluggo,
yes,
is it possible that Trump is burning the Reichstag at both ends?
that's good. I like that. Okay, very quickly, who can tell me the poet who coined the term burning the candle at both ends and why? Anybody know real quick before you look it up on your phone? Her name was Edna St. Vincent Millay, and she was famously bisexual in 1913 before it became fashionable. But thank you for that, Mike. Yes, he's burning the Reichstag at both ends, no doubt about it. Lynn Feinerman and then Dorothy Reich and then Steve Caruso. Go ahead, Lynn,
Thank
and then
you.
we'll go to John Brakey and Ken Bennett.
Thank you. I just, in response to what you were talking about Schiff and Morgan, they basically bought the United States government. I think it's really important for us to, they didn't bail anybody out. They got more, vastly more than they put in. I mean, they made an investment and privatized. But to
Right.
go on to the empathy matter, Elon Musk has been talking a lot on media about empathy. And what he said, one of the things he said was the greatest weakness of Western civilization is empathy. And that's a quote, a direct quote. And what this actually dovetails into is the white Christian nationalist extreme right program about the sin of empathy. Andrew Watkins, whom we interviewed on our Project 2025 program, went into this in detail, that she heard as a child, from ages like 5 to 8, that empathy was a sin because you should be happy that God has made people suffer for what they've done.
Well, the question then is, what was Jesus if not empathy? I mean, what
Hello?
distinguished? Yeah, are you still hearing me? We all right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
I
said
mean, yes.
hello.
Jesus was all about empathy.
Of
Turn the other
course.
cheek, love thy neighbor, do unto others. Do
Yeah.
unto others, by the way, what he got from his Jewish rabbi teacher, Hillel. Hillel was asked, Hillel was contemporary to Jesus, and he was asked to explain the Bible, the Torah, while standing on one foot. And he stood on one foot and he said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All the
Actually,
rest
what
is
he said
detail.
was, do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto
Right.
you. However, that's Judaism. And, there is such a thing as real Christianity. White Christian nationalists are not practicing either one.
They're not Christian.
Yeah.
Or at least they're antichrist. I mean, Jesus was nothing if more, as far as I can tell, than having preached empathy. And I don't understand how these guys, of course, it reminded me, can preach that empathy is bad. It reminded me of Ayn Rand, the fountainhead. And that's what her shtick was, that empathy was bad. I don't get it. If anybody can give me, no, I didn't want to hear an explanation. It makes no sense. But thank you
And
for
she
that.
was actually born and raised Jewish.
She was. Yes, she
Woo!
was. And then
Yeah.
at the end of her life, after railing against socialism her entire life, Ayn Rand got on Social Security.
Yeah.
I was, everybody loved that. Okay, Dorothy Reich. Thank you, Lynn. Dorothy Reich, and then Julie had her hand and then disappeared. And then we'll go to John. Dr. Nancy, and then John Brakey. Go ahead, Dorothy, and
So I
then
was going to say the same thing. Elon Musk, it's a Silicon Valley thing. It's a tech bro thing. That empathy is going to destroy civilization. That's what they
empathy
say.
is civilization. Isn't that right? Isn't empathy what civilization is?
Not to them.
Well, what?
How
What
could you
is it to
have a
them?
person with empathy and you want to destroy the USAID? And you want to kill PEPFAR and you want to burn
Does
food rather than give it to people. How could these people have no empathy? They have no human feelings. They're automatons. I don't. They're going to be in charge if we don't watch out. It's a very scary
well,
situation.
it's an age old. Does being against empathy mean that if you walk down the street and you see somebody homeless, that you have to kick them? Is
I
that
believe
being?
that people think that people who are homeless, people who are crippled, people who are anything but a perfect white male or white female is disposable. We are disposable. They don't care. These people are just a burden to them. Somebody who's disabled is a burden. They die.
Well,
That's a good thing because now there's less of a burden on them to support these people. They don't want. That's why they're taking away Medicaid. They don't believe. You heard what Donald Trump said to his brother when was it his brother when his son was so very sick and disabled that you should just let him die. He said, "Let him die. He doesn't even recognize you. What do you care?" He had. These are not. They
so
don't have no
the
regard for
question
human
then,
unless they're fully functional white males or white females who can make babies for them.
well, here's a
No
question
empathy.
then. Yeah, is a society that has no empathy actually civilized?
Probably not.
Well, it's a question worth asking. Thank you.
Well, we're not civilized. If we go down the path we're going, we're not going to be civilized
Well,
anymore.
we're going to talk to John Brakey. Is an election and Ken Bennett is a country that has completely bogus elections actually a democracy. A couple more people, John, then we'll come to you. Steve Caruso had a hand. Dorothy, Dave, Julie, and then I can't take any more questions because we got to go to John, and then we'll continue this after we talk with John and Ken. But go ahead, Steve, Nancy, Salty, and Julie. Go ahead, real quick.
What's the difference between sympathy for the devil and real empathy? There's a quandary there.
The
And
Rolling
Trump,
Stones. That's a different. It's like the Rolling Stones versus the Beatles. That
right?
answers everything. There you go. That answers everything, right?
Does Trump hanging out with prostitutes make him Jesus? Okay, I'm done.
Well,
Thanks.
as long as they're underage. Dr.
Or were
Nancy.
they prostitutes? Go
No,
ahead,
they
Nancy.
weren't. They
Right.
weren't. They're
They were
kids.
forced.
Dr. Nancy, Dave, Julie, and then we're going to go to John Brakey and Ken Bennett. Nancy?
I think anytime empathy is discussed, it should start out with a definition. And empathy means that you actually share the feelings of the other person. And that takes energy around fighting your own war. And so it's threatening to people like Elon Musk and Trump that to lose some of that energy of just fighting for yourself.
Okay.
That's
We'll get back to that. That's interesting. But this to me, I think is a core issue of everything we're up against, and we'll come
But
back.
it's not just about being nice to somebody. It's about actually
Yeah,
identifying with their pain or their
yeah.
situation.
And when we come back, and I'm going to call on you again, Nancy, because we need to discuss the difference between empathy and compassion, but not now. Let's come back to that. Salty, Julie, and then we'll go to John.
I don't know the book, and I had not even heard of this discussion, but I quickly looked up the book, and the Wikipedia entry says there's a very distinct difference between empathy and compassion. And it says that the author is not against empathy 100%, let's call it. He is, as Dr. Nancy pointed out, the putting yourself in the place of the aggrieved party. So if they're homeless, you feel homeless. You don't hate them. You feel like you're homeless. And it's not the same as compassion, which means you wish them all the best in life. And you try to even help that. And I'm just going to give one example of empathy that happened to a good friend of mine, Charlie Allenson, who received a kidney transplant from a live donor. that person had both empathy for Charlie. He was still alive when they removed his kidney. And he had compassion for Charlie because he gave that kidney to Charlie. And Charlie doesn't know who he is. He wrote a song praising him for his expression both of empathy and compassion. So I think that we're when we all of a sudden look, I'm all for attacking everybody. I think it's really unfair to my Christian friend, if I have any left, that we make that a knife in their backs. I think that is. And I have one other question about the barons, the robber barons. You said 1901.
Thereabouts.
The year that Theodore Roosevelt became president.
Yes.
Was involved in their
He was afterwards, because the country went completely nuts, and J.P. Morgan bought off Theodore Roosevelt by arranging the financing for the Panama Canal.
Brilliant.
And we'll come back to that. We're going to come back to this discussion. I will point out very, very briefly, my friend Bonnie Raitt, who's one of the great people that ever lived, wrote the definitive song about compassion, which won the Grammy for Best Song 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh.
It's called Just Like That, and it's based on as they say, based on a true story. A woman was in a car crash that killed her son, and she donated the son's heart to somebody unknown. And years later, the guy tracked her down and thanked her. It's a true story. Everybody should listen to this song Just Like That. And if you can get through it without crying, mazel tov. But it's devastating. And only Bonnie Raitt could have pulled that song off. It's an incredible song. Just Like That. Okay, Julie, and then we'll go to John Brakey. Julie Levine, please. Great to see you, Julie. Hello? Can you unmute? Are you there?
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Here I am, right?
Yes.
Okay. This is such an important conversation. I'll try to talk quickly. I now live in a white nationalist Christian community in the mountains, okay, in the Sequoia National Forest. And I think that what people are saying, I don't really disagree, but I think it's way more nuanced than what you're saying. I have conversations with all 200 residents. We all live within 7 miles of each other, and we're an hour from the closest town. And everybody feels that they're caring and compassionate and empathetic. They all, even me, even a Black person in the town, whatever it is, they would embrace them out of the church, out of caring. It's so complicated, and yet they buy this ideology, through what they're learning in the churches, but also they buy the ideology because of their inherent racism, that somehow illegal people are coming into the country and taking away their jobs, and they want America back. Their way of expressing love is to go protest outside an abortion clinic. It's scary as hell. But I'm telling you that every time I post about, and I post a lot and I have conversations with everyone, and every time I post about compassion or love, everyone agrees with me. And when my mom died, I had more baskets of food. And then the final thing I want to say is that there are people in the left, which I am in, right?
Yeah.
That have been so lacking in compassion, so judgmental. I was told that I should go die. I should go to a hospital and die because I chose, for a lot of really good reasons in my case, not to get a COVID vaccine. And, I was denied entry to even outdoor events, and I did not feel I was dealt with kindly at all. So I think we need to look very deeply at what this means, because frankly, one of the reasons people go to the right is because that church movement and all that kind of stuff embraces them and makes them feel loved and really cared about.
Wow. Julie, thank you for that. Well, let's come back. We're going to come back in the second hour towards the end. I mean, this is such an incredibly important discussion. And so we will come back in the second hour to this. I do want to jump in with also incredibly important stuff, with John Brakey and Ken Bennett on election issues, and then with Sam Saltman on the 9th and 10th Amendment and what the real core legalities are of sending National Guard troops into other cities and other issues having to deal with gerrymandering as well. So John Brakey and Ken Bennett, we've got 87 people. We're live, and you're apparently somewhere in the Grand Canyon. So give us the latest update now on the fight for democracy and your 5 key points that we want to turn into a major document on the coming 26th election.
Ken Bennett can start his video now if he wants. Thanks.
Okay, Ken, you can fire up your video if you want, but go ahead.
I am driving back from Utah, where I was visiting my three children and 10 grandchildren. And so I am literally on the side of a road in between Las Vegas and Kingman, Arizona. I do not have the capability to start anything unless John has it.
All right, well, go ahead, guys.
Yeah.
Ken Bennett, I will tell everyone, is the former president of the Arizona Senate and a former secretary, a Republican Secretary of State of the state of Arizona. And John Brakey is a inveterate democracy activist based in Tucson. So go ahead, guys. Give us the latest update.
Well,
let me start first. Oh, okay, go ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say more about Ken is that, you know, we've become very, very close friends. Probably most of you know that. We've known each other since about 2012, when he used to get a lot of phone calls from people saying, hey, we got this guy Brakey and March running around the state or whatever. And we became very close friends through the Maricopa audit. And because
proving
we
that,
found ourselves in the
proving
same
that Republicans and Democrats can be close friends. Now you're working together on the issue of election. What do you have to update us for on your 5 key points for the
Harvey?
Yes,
Harvey. This is Ken, and we have come up with a 5-point plan on how to make sure that people can have trust in their elections, and we're working to get election jurisdictions. In Arizona, that's counties. We have 15 counties. They're in charge of the elections. The state just adds the numbers together for the state totals, but which is what I did as the Secretary of State. But the 5 points, let me just go quickly through the 5 points. First point is to publish the list by name and address of those that are eligible to vote in the election. Yes, we acknowledge that you can redact the individual names and addresses of people who are entitled to such on a state-by-state basis, victims of domestic violence, or judges, or prosecutors, or people that work in law enforcement. But in Arizona, that's very small. There's maybe 8,000 to 10,000 people that are redacted out of a voter eligibility in Arizona of 4.1 million. And then, so first point is publish who's eligible to vote by name and address. Therefore, you can tell how many Kenneth R. Bennett's in Yavapai County are eligible to vote. Right now, there's one of us. It's me. Now, 25 years ago, here's an interesting tidbit. 25 years ago, a guy moved into the neighboring community where I live. His name was Kenneth Ray Bennett. My name is Kenneth Roy Bennett. So for a period of time, there were 2 Kenneth R. Bennetts in Yavapai County, both eligible to vote. And if they did so, not a problem. But if you looked at the voter registration rolls and looked at my address in Prescott, Arizona, if you saw a Kenneth R. and a Kenneth Roy and a Ken and a Kenny and if you found 18 different versions of Ken Bennett, then you know somebody's playing a fast one on probably trying to vote more than once. Okay, so first is publish who's eligible to vote by name and address. Second, after the election occurs, publish the list by name and address of who voted. There should not be any, and this is all public information already. I'm not trying to let the cat out of the bag that these are public records already. There shouldn't be anybody on the who voted list who wasn't on the first list eligible to vote. Third, verify that there are the same number of ballots as there were people who voted. We don't need to know, and we don't know whose ballot is whose, but we should be able to verify that if 800,000 people voted out of a million registered to vote, that the number of ballots counted in that election adds up to 800,000. The fourth step is release what are called the ballot images, anonymous ballot images. We don't know whose ballot is whose, but release the ballot images and the record. It's a spreadsheet of how they tabulated the votes off of each ballot. If you look at ballot number 600 and you go to row 600 of that spreadsheet, you can see on the ballot image that they voted for Smith in this race and Jones in this race and Garcia in that race. You go to row 600 of the spreadsheet, it's called the cast vote record, CVR. You go to row 600, you can see whether the county or election jurisdiction recorded a vote for Smith in this race and Jones and Garcia.
But there's no way to tell who actually cast that ballot.
Correct. The only way to tell, and you can make accommodations for this, Harvey, is if a county creates an extremely small precinct, like in Arizona, one of our counties has a precinct with 4 people in it. If 4 people are all that's in a precinct and 2 of them vote and they both vote the same way in one office or another, then you could say, oh, we now know how person A and B voted. But that information is already published by these voter systems, management systems, in what's called the statement of votes cast, because we report results based on precincts. So
now, does this system predicate or assume that everybody votes on a paper ballot?
No. Whether you vote on a paper ballot, whether you voted on a machine for people who are deaf or blind, or you can puff into some machines and record your vote by puffing error. Now, it creates a paper trail in Arizona. It creates a paper trail so that somebody can look and see. Somebody helping the voter can say, this says you voted for John. Is that who you wanted to vote for, or whatever? And voters have the right to bring somebody in there to do that. But those are very minuscule in numbers situations. But whether you're using a paper ballot or you're puffing into a device to record your ballot, it's still the choices that you chose in the offices that you were voting for are still recorded in this cast vote record. And so you can compare the paper record of voters to what was recorded in the system, and then you can add up the columns for each candidate in that cast vote record spreadsheet to make sure that if Jones got 50,000 total votes in the system, that's what the county reported that they got. And then the last, and this is kind of like frosting on the cake, the 5th point is allow in close races, allow candidates or the public or the media or anybody to request samples of actual paper ballots to compare to the ballot images that were captured by the machines as those paper ballots went through the machines, or the electronic ballot was recorded in the machine. Allow a random sample, 100, 200, however, it depends on how many people vote in an election, but just allow people to randomly select a few hundred, a few percent, whatever, of the actual paper ballots. Tell the county, okay, I want to look at paper ballot number 65 and 532 and 1263, and we're going to compare them against the ballot images that you recorded as they went through your machines to make sure that nobody's messing with the ballot images.
Okay, so then that we've got those 5 points. That's great, and we look forward to you and John writing up a very clear, explicit piece on this. Here's a question. Where does vote by mail fit into this? Donald Trump now says he wants to abolish vote by mail. I will point out that historically, more ballots are mailed from Republicans than Democrats. But
He will
not
not.
last
Yeah,
election.
he will
Now,
not.
but
I don't believe he will succeed in getting rid of vote by mail. In Arizona, 80% of voters, including the majority of Republicans and Democrats and independents, vote by getting their ballot mailed to them. Now, that's what I do. I don't return it by mail. I take it down and drop it or hand it to a election worker at the county. Voting by mail is simply a way of either getting the ballot from the election jurisdiction to the voter and maybe or allowing them to mail that ballot back in. In Arizona, that ballot has to be in the hands of the election jurisdiction, the county, by 7 p.m. So they go to great lengths to tell people after probably Thursday or Friday of the week before, don't mail your ballot in, bring it in person. So
so
all of this,
if a mail-in ballot in Arizona is postmarked before election day, but
doesn't matter.
arrives after election day, it's not allowed?
Correct.
Wow. That varies from state to state quite radically.
As does the who's on the eligible to vote list. Some states allow voters to register on election day and vote right then. Fine. You still, by the time the election's over, you have a list of who was eligible. In Arizona, we cut off election or registration to vote 29 days before an election. So we know 28 days before the election who's on the list of eligible voters. And then we mail out the ballots to those that want to have asked us to send it to them by mail 27 days before the election.
Well, how do you register to vote in Arizona? How do you register to vote?
Most people do online.
Really?
Arizona was the first state to allow online voter registration, which relies very heavily on having a driver's license or state issued ID with the state of Arizona, which is usually the initial trigger of getting registered to vote. And we did so because of rural parts of Arizona, tribal areas, and people that, not everybody has a driver's license. So it's not a driver's license requirement, but most people register online, and Arizona was the first state to allow online voter registration.
That's amazing. I don't know. We should look it up, I guess, how many states allow online registration. Nationwide, one of the arguments against not allowing you to mail in your ballot is that in some localities you face intimidation at the polling place. And mailing in a ballot protects you against being intimidated at the polling place.
And in Arizona, we allow basically four, I'm going to say 4 ways of getting your ballot to the election administrators. One is to return it by mail. One is to go to a polling location. Another is to drop it into a secure lockbox that is monitored and required to be monitored by our laws. And then the fourth one is for people such as in the military or overseas workers, they can actually submit a ballot by email. But those are the 4 primary methods in Arizona.
Right. Now you can't see, Ken, but Steve Caruso's put up a thing saying that, Trump is now arguing against voting machines, which, we've been fighting voting machines for 20 years. So most of the ballots in the United States now are already paper. And John Brakey has been the major pioneer advocating for a ballot imaging as a backup, which I guess you have in Arizona. Is that correct?
Well, 99.8% of the ballots in Arizona are cast on paper ballots. When those paper ballots are fed into the machines, they're not voting on the machines. We feed those paper ballots into readers, machines that are programmed to say, okay, if this is a ballot in Yavapai County, in this city, in this neighborhood, because of city council districts or or a county supervisor district, there's lots of different ballot styles. There's tens of thousands of ballot styles to conduct an election in Arizona with 4.1 million registered voters in 15 counties, in 91 cities, and on and on and on. So the machines just read the ballot. They look for pixels of blackness at this point, and they're programmed correctly to say that's a vote for Smith. If they find a pixel of blackness in this other location, that's Jones. And that's why we believe so strongly in releasing the ballot images and the cast vote record spreadsheet to make sure that when you can clearly see that they voted for Smith in this race, a vote for Smith was recorded in the spreadsheet, and then double verify that by randomly selecting a few paper ballots and making sure that they exactly match the images that the county took of those paper ballots when they were fed through the machines. Now,
And
they're also
how quickly does Arizona get its results?
we are on the slow side. And that's because we have some state laws that allow, if they mailed in their ballot and the county had that ballot by 7 p.m. closing on election day, but they forgot to sign the envelope verifying that they are who they are, or they moved and didn't tell anybody at the county, there's a cure period of 5 business days, which with a weekend in between means there's a full week in Arizona where if a county receives a ballot by mail or by Dropbox and the address didn't match or something, the signature doesn't match, the voter has basically a week to come in and show, oh, I broke my arm, my signature changed, or I'm now 62 and my signature is different than when I registered at 26.
Well, the big one we're expecting in 2026, and this is a major issue, is the discrepancy between a woman's, that some people don't believe at this point in time that women should vote, and they think the 19th Amendment should be repealed. And so the big discrepancy is women's maiden names versus married names.
Well,
and
in
that,
Arizona,
that will be a big issue.
yeah. Well, that's why step 1 and 2 of our 5-point plan is publish by name and address in each county, by precinct, who's eligible to vote. If my wife is registered by her maiden name, that's fine. Now, you're supposed to be registered by your legal name, but her maiden name is now her middle name when she married me. But other people do it different ways. If they keep their maiden, if they pick another, or if they change their name for whatever reason, that's how you should be registered to vote. But you should have an address, and people can verify how many Ken Bennett's are on Maple Street in precinct number 1 in Yavapai County. If there's one, we're good. If there's 26 of us, all different variations, we got a problem.
Right. But as I say, the big fight, the one of all the ethnic and whatever groups that are in the public, the one that's most strongly against Trump is women. And, that we expect a battle on that for discrepancies of names, for maiden name versus married name. It's going to be very interesting. And this sounds like Arizona has a very sane setup, and we hope that you'll codify it. Folks, I hope you all understand. Ken Bennett is a former Secretary of State of the state of Arizona as a Republican, and this sounds all very organized. Milo Reeson, go ahead, and then Steve Caruso. Anybody else want to jump in with Ken Bennett and John Brakely, please do. At the top of the hour, we're going to go to Sam Saltman and talk about the 9th and 10th Amendments. But go ahead, Milo Reeson.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend John Brakey and Ken Bennett for their really important work in helping to achieve a certain amount of well-deserved confidence in our voting system. I still wonder about certain vulnerabilities that I've been learning about. One based on the fact that was demonstrated at the recent voting village that a voter could think that they were voting for legalizing marijuana, but they were actually voting against it, and the printout would look like that they had voted that their vote had been recorded correctly, and they would agree to it, and yet when the tabulation went through, that their vote would be tabulated opposite of what they had talked about. So that's one of that was a vulnerability that was shown in
Okay, that's our step. That's our step.
Wait, hold on. The
Okay.
Dominion ballot marking devices. And Ken, were you about to respond to that?
Well, I was about to say that that's why step 4 is to release publicly the ballot images, the images of the paper ballots or the images of the paper receipt that's issued or should be issued to a person if they vote on a machine. There should still be a paper trail, in my opinion, and states that are not doing that, I think, are creating a vulnerability, as you've noted, that should not exist.
But Ken,
let me add in here because
can I just
go ahead.
say that the point was that the ballot image would look correct when it was not correct. So even if it were released,
that's why you release the ballot images and the cast vote record spreadsheet, which shows whether a yes vote on the ballot on Proposition 1, 2, 3 was recorded as a yes vote in the system. Now, we all, as voters, we all have to be careful because some political machinations do get used by people who write these ballot propositions, and they write them so that if you really want to vote no, you got to vote yes because of the way they framed the question, or vice versa. But after you get over that, bunch of crap, we want to make sure that if they voted yes on the ballot, it was recorded as a yes in the cast vote record, because it's the cast vote record that is the actual spreadsheet which tabulates the votes from the election. And we want to make sure that anybody can verify that their selection on the ballot was correctly recorded in the cast vote record.
But Ken, she's talking about a particular problem. Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Is that I understand what she's saying, and she's right, because what the scenario is is that they write in, I voted for marijuana. There it is, okay? But the barcode could be switched, and the barcode say it's a no. Now, in Arizona, we have very little of those kind of machines. Most of it's hand marked. Most people, 85% of the ballots come in through an envelope in our state now, okay? But this is a problem in other states, and this is a valid problem, and it would be kind of hard. All I can say is, with our program ABE that we built, okay, we really focus in on ballot marking devices because this could be a real problem, okay? And I work hard as I can to tell people don't get stuck voting on those. If they have a voting center and that's all they have for machines, you better demand a hand-marked paper ballot, which is not the case in most of our state, but they do have some precincts that they gang these machines together, and their trickery could be. It's not as good as a hand-marked paper ballot.
Right. Hand-marked paper ballots remain. I will suggest on referenda involving marijuana that you use the puff method, and everybody who's in favor of it smoke a joint when they go. All right, never mind. Okay, Steve Caruso. Maya, was that enough for you, or can we go to Steve Caruso?
Just one more thing. I really hope that that you and Ken will consider working with some of the hackers who demonstrated these vulnerabilities and see if they are sufficiently reassured by your method. And Steve Caruso sent out a really important link to a video last night with Marilyn Marks and Jessica Denson, and I'm hoping that you might be commenting on that, Steve, because I had some questions about what the problems that they raised. Thank you.
Yes,
I
that's
want you to know, I
fine.
posted that online. It is, I want to talk about that show down the line here because that was phenomenal. Okay. It drove me to work almost late to last night writing an article called Ballots Over Bullets, because I do believe it's going to be contagious. And I do think that it's an offset election with inflation catching up, things like that. I cannot see how they can do very good in next year's November election unless they cheat. Or if we win, if we can't prove that we really won, it could go to violence.
Go ahead. Robert Cesario said he tried to click on the link and had a problem. I don't know. Steve, go ahead. Steve Caruso. We have 87 people with us.
Jessica, that's in the link. Yep. So yeah, in Ramapo in Rockland County, New York, this is where Lulu Free's at in Smart Elections, are finding and have affidavits of people who voted, but their vote did not show up on the cast vote record. So people are changing the ballots. They could be changing the images. Everything you count on as being a legitimate election is up for grabs with these guys. It's not a physical war of violence and guns. It's a cyber war where they're grabbing everything they can and running away and not getting caught. So Ohio, you can ask for a paper ballot and they'll give you one that's not provisional. And there's other states too, I'm sure. You go into a place, they got the walls lined with machines. It looks all kind of high-techy professional. Just go up to the desk, say, I want a paper ballot. And they should be able to print you one out there on the spot with your information. I'm not sure how many states do that, but yeah, people are working on what happened in 2024, and we're still waiting for answers. If these guys want to surrender and confess before they find out, hey, we'll take it, but no holds barred. Thanks.
The argument that's being made about 24 is that it was not stolen; it was bought and paid for, and that the margins in the 7 swing states were all just beyond the mandatory recount margin, and that would indicate a few $billion here or there from the likes of Elon Musk. That's the presumption or the argument that does not have an answer at this point in time. John Brakey and Ken Bennett, you guys are always incredible. Is there anything you want to add before we move on?
I do real quickly is that, we do live in a digital age. The old system was an optical scan, left no evidence behind. We're damn fools if we don't use that evidence. And we develop a redundant system that you have a hand-marked paper ballot that's married to a ballot image at the end of the election, 2 days after the county certifies. Every precinct committeeman and woman in the state should be emailed a cast vote record database for their precinct, okay? And then the images are hyperlinked, and 0.5 that Ken was talking about is a ballot library. After you get done, you should be able to say, I want to take a closer look at this ballot and that ballot. And I just want to point out, these machines are capable of being accurate in one mark in 250,000 marks. That means one error in 250,000. And I've looked at enough ballot images that I could see that being the case. But I'm not looking at ballot images of counties that are dirty and destroy this stuff and hide it. So redundancy is an important word, and we have to have that, and we have to make elections where they're publicly verifiable. Voting is a secret process, but counting is a public process. And part of the story, just in closing, one last thing. In 1912, when you went to vote in Arizona, you would vote in a paper ballot. They'd put it in the box and they could say, hey, Harvey, why don't you come back at 7 o'clock and you can watch us count it. And then what would happen is that they would count the ballot in front of everybody, and then they would punch a hole in it and they'd put it on a string, and you could walk by and take a look at all the ballots and run your own little count. That's what we're trying to do. That is what Abe is about. And we're not charging for it. We're promoting it, but we're also promoting other systems. We want people to say, hey, we can build something like Abe. Please, we'll help you build it. Because transparency is the only way out of this thing, and things will get nasty. Inflation is up, everything is going crazy, and I can't. It's mind-boggling. I went food
Well, the
shopping yesterday.
struggle,
I couldn't believe the price of produce.
the
Thank you.
struggle for a legitimate, verifiable election in 2026 is going to be epic. I mean, this is really, I can't, everybody knows what we're going into here. Still have 86 people with us. Thank you very much. Ken Bennett, did you want to add anything? We don't want you to lose
Oh,
your license.
well, I know I pulled over so that you weren't hearing me driving down the road noise and stuff. But I'm glad John talked about redundancy. But then I was going to say the only word more important than that, and then he mentioned it, is transparency. We have to have transparency. Who was eligible to vote? Who voted? Are there the same exact number of ballots? We don't know whose is whose, but are there the same number of ballots as people who voted?
Well, but
can we see the ballot images?
As Greg Pallas has pointed out, the big battle in Georgia and elsewhere is who is going to be allowed to vote, and that is in a whole other world. But you've got the mechanics.
And that's fine, and that's fine. But we, at some point, we have to say, who did you declare? Georgia, Arizona, whoever, every one of the 50 states. Who did you declare was eligible to vote?
Yes.
And did they vote? And then and only then can we tell, are people being allowed to register and vote only once? Because that should be the case.
Right.
And so all of those steps are to address the issues.
Well, as Yogi Berra would say, the demand for redundancy is worth repeating. So, all right, listen, both you guys.
I got to quote you on that. That's a good one. I like.
All right. Well, I'm in New Jersey, near where he lived. So listen, you guys are absolutely legendary. We want you to prepare a document, please. We will send it around, and then we'll have you back to discuss these 5 major points on the voting. But God knows the war over the 2026 election is going to be really, really hardcore. And you've got the basics nailed down, and then we'll have to have Greg and others talk about who's actually going to be allowed to vote. And this issue with women, and the maiden name versus legal married name, that's going to be bigger than a lot of people are thinking at this point in time.
And also, please watch the Jessica Dunson and Marilyn Marks video. It is so important. The points that came out in that video are phenomenal. And that's where I sent you, Harvey, a story called Ballots Over Bullets. And we have 15 months to get this thing right. And that's where I made it a lot enough that you could edit it and create a story out of it. And there it is on the screen right now.
There's Jessica.
This is a must-see video.
Can somebody send that by email to us, please?
It's on the chat.
Yeah, I can't copy.
We'll send it.
Yeah.
We'll send it out. Since you've requested it, we'll send it to the whole list.
I appreciate that. Can I make a comment?
Very quickly, Mickey. Yes, glad to have you with us. Go ahead.
Thank you. I live in Rockland County. Ramapo is 15 minutes from me. We've been very involved in trying to push to have this heard because there were irregularities that were counted and seen in Rockland County that Trump won and Lawler won, both of them Republicans, but everybody else did not. And so it was, it was impossible not to have had them hacked with or manipulated. And at one point, it wasn't your group. I think it was a different group, maybe the PDA on a Sunday. It was described that you could get into both Dominion and the ES&S. All it needed was 10, 15 minutes. Somebody who was in the Board of Elections could take the gizzards out, and that had been designed. There was a place to put a thumbnail thing in, and you could control it from the outside. And I think this is what was alluded to in Western Pennsylvania. Even Trump, you know how he boasts and he says, "Oh, Elon's helping us, and he's a genius, and he knows what to do with the voting." And 99% of the people let it go. And I'm saying, holy shit, he got involved in getting into the voting machines, into the electronic gizzards.
Yeah.
So
There you go. Well, you know, we have in this country a system of $1, one vote. And that's what we're up against. And 2026 is going to be the major choice. Although I will say one thing, we are having a special election in California in November because of the question of the gerrymandering. And I am hoping that we can put on this special election an initiative to reverse all the horrible things that the Public Utilities Commission has done to solar energy in California. That would really be a fitting tribute to our democracy, to, you know, this issue of gerrymandering we will discuss later, but you know, using this special election to reverse the attack on solar, that would be wonderful. Really fitting for Gavin Newsom, who's been a terrible enemy of solar power. Still have 85 people with us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John and Ken. You are just phenomenal. And we'll have you back. Again, we're not meeting next week. We will meet the week after. We got to go to Sam Saltman in just 1 second. But LYNN FEINERMAN, did you want to raise a hand real quick?
Yeah, just real quick. You know, the capper to all of this, if we're looking at the executive orders on no mail-in votes, et cetera, is that 3 of the people who were on the Supreme Crooks were in the Brooks Brothers Brigade in Florida that shut down the 2000 campaign so that the votes couldn't be counted.
The counting of the ballots.
Yeah, Roberts, Barrett, and Kavanaugh.
Right, the Brooks Brothers mob.
Yeah, so we're looking at really trying to keep it out of the Supreme Crooks
And also
purview.
Bolton, was John Bolton in the Brooks Brothers mob?
Yeah, he was down there. He was doing the same thing.
Yeah, and here we go. Trump sends the FBI after him. I hope the FBI asks John Bolton about his role in killing the vote count in South Florida. Wouldn't that be ironic? All right, John and Ken, thank you so much. Ken, drive carefully, please, and make sure you use your air conditioner. All right, we got Sam Saltman with us. Mike Hirsch, did you want to jump in real quick? And then
Yeah, real quick, I saw before the great John Breakey leaves us, I saw him nodding. Mickey brought up some really good points, and I saw John nodding. John, if you wanted to maybe expand briefly on what Mickey was pointing out in terms, I think she meant thumb drive, not thumbnail, but go ahead.
Well, it is a real problem. I mean, it's, you know, hey, we built Abe and it's 210 kilobytes is all it is, okay? If I was Doug Logan, who stole out of, and I know Doug Logan, he got Arizona's Dominion system, he got ESNS in another place in Michigan, and he got Dominion. He knows how to build a code, and he could build a macro that's maybe only 50 to 100 kilobytes and say every 10 votes that are undervotes, switch one to Trump. Do this, do that, and it would self-erase. You know, I'm after 5 counties in Arizona right now because I do believe that a CD6 congressional race where in 2014 we sued and they spent $6.7 million. This time they spent $14 million for a congressional seat, and it looks really dirty. And I'm fighting to get the records, and hopefully those records will be resolved the next 60 days, that I can get back and get those records. And thank God for what Lulu Freisdad is doing in New York and what other people are doing, because nobody should walk away from a ballot box wondering if it's real or not in this age with what we know.
Our task for the next 12, 14 months is to make sure, against all odds, that we have a fair and reliable election in 26. And we're going to talk to Sam Saltman about this. Sam Saltman's an attorney in New Jersey, the son of Dave Saltman here. And we've been talking for a good year about something called indigenous originalism, which is the reference to the body of law that was in place before the 1787 Constitutional Convention. But in terms of the Constitutional Convention itself and the 26th election, we have the issue of the 9th and 10th Amendments. And we now have a president sending National Guard troops from other states into states that don't want them there. And this is unprecedented in American history. In the past, National Guard troops have been called up by governors of their own states. I do not believe there is an instance in American history where National Guard troops have been sent into a state where the governor of that state has specifically asked that they not be sent in. This is completely unprecedented. We also have the situation where the President of the United States told the legislature of the state of Texas to change their voting districts. I guarantee you that also has never happened in the history of the United States before this. So Sam Saltman is an expert on the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution. And this is a very big deal. This is part and parcel of our alleged the structure of our government. And you know, we had a guy in the Supreme Court named what the hell was his name? Not Alito. I keep getting Scalia, Antonin Scalia, who was supposed to be this great jurist, and he would come down these absolutely anti-people, anti-demonstrate, anti-democracy decisions that he claimed came straight from the original drafters of the Constitution, as if he had gone into seance and talked to George Washington and James Madison. But the 9th and 10th Amendments speak very clearly to the point of these intrusions by the federal government into states' rights. Sam, can you take it from there?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well,
I
we got
wanna
81
say,
people listening to you, and you're going out live to the big time. So please.
nice. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to say what I'm going to talk about is a bit more in the world of ideas and the battle of both propaganda as well as a constitutional law argument that can be made on the ground in a more practical matter. I think the two should be married and can be combined. I happen to have here with me the Anti-Federalist Papers and the Constitutional Convention debates, Robert Meacham. And one of the things that really struck me as I was reading it just last weekend was the one and only time that George Washington spoke during the Constitutional Convention, at least in terms of giving an idea as opposed to sort of presiding as a figurehead, was with respect to the number of people that the individual member of the House of Representatives should represent. So originally, it was written that it should be 40,000 per one representative. And at the very end, this is very close to the signing of the Constitution, there was still a lot of controversy, a lot of disagreement, and many people were threatening not to sign the Constitution. In the end, 3 people didn't. 3 very famous founding fathers. I think it was Mason, Elbridge Gerry, and Patrick
Dickinson. Dickinson from Pennsylvania.
Those were the ones I think that were there and didn't sign, and there were plenty of others that left before because they couldn't take it. They thought we were heading towards tyranny. Interesting how they had some foresight there. So the one thing that George Washington stood up to discuss was when a man who I don't even know who this is, Mr. Gorham, requested that this be changed, that it go from 40,000 to 30,000, so that there's more, obviously, a connection between the people who are represented and their representatives. And the one time Washington decided to speak up was on this issue. And he said, for the purpose of putting the question, although he had been restrained up until that point, he ought now to he could not forbear expressing his wish that the alteration proposed might take place. And so I did the math, and based on our population now, if it was one representative to every 30,000, that would mean that the House of Representatives would have to have about 11,600 members in it. So not exactly practical, okay? But the larger point is to show, and I think one of the things that I forget, I'm sorry if I forget your name, the voting as sacred, voting as a sacred process.
John Breaky.
Reiki, yes. You know, one of the things that I want to do with the Ninth Amendment. So let me first step back and tell you, what does the Ninth Amendment say? The Ninth Amendment says, and it's in its entirety. It's a one sentence amendment, and it's very concise and clear, at least according to me. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And so to me, what this clearly means is that there are enumeration of rights. The First Amendment through the Eighth Amendment lists a number of rights expressly stated. In the Constitution, prior to the amendments, you had the right of habeas corpus. There were other enumerated rights in the first version of the Constitution before the Bill of Rights passed. And so the Ninth Amendment is basically saying, hey, wait, just in case anyone were to misconstrue what we're doing here, just because we listed a bunch of rights does not mean those are the only rights people have, right? So in other words, there are unenumerated rights. The problem and the difficulty that we've had over really since the founding in interpreting and applying the Ninth Amendment is the question of, well, what are those rights? How do we really figure out those rights? How do we find a objective standard that allows us to figure out what those rights are? And in a lot of debates I've had with conservatives over the years, one of the main things they say is, where's the right to vote in the Constitution? Where's the right to education in the Constitution? Where's the right to clean air in the Constitution? And the answer is it's not there, but we have the Ninth Amendment. That doesn't automatically mean that those are the rights that are referred to, but that's where the work begins. And that's what one of the things I've been trying to do is to sort of establish this, both using the historical record, the philosophical record, which I think gets downplayed too often, and of course, the plain language of the document itself. And so one of my arguments, and the one that's related to what we're talking about today, is of course, the voting is a sacred, natural right that the people retain. And when you take what George Washington said, and I have something else, one of the people that I think we too often neglect is Thomas Paine. I think, for various reasons, but one of the things that he said, or that you can take from his work, is that he drew a connection between natural rights, man's natural rights to be his own lawgiver in what's called the state of nature, sort of the pre-civilization state that people were in, or at least they theorize, political philosophers theorize that was a state that we were in, and then we sort of traded some of that freedom for the security of civilization. And so there's a clear line between the right to be your own lawgiver in the state of nature to a right of what you would call proportion of legislative sovereignty in a direct democracy to a right to vote in a representative democracy. So that right there is a sort of a way to tie in this right to vote and the Ninth Amendment and any sort of encroachment on one man, one vote. And Harvey, I love your line about $1, one vote, which is exactly what it is. And we're really far behind on this. There's a lot of catching up to do because the right to vote has been so diluted, even before Citizens United, let alone the mid-decade redistricting that we're going through right now, which is clearly illegal on multiple fronts, right? And so what I want to do, one of my goals is to sort of return to first principles, to reclaim the mantle of patriots and constitutionalists, so to speak, for the left, because it's so obvious and clear that this entire time Scalia, from the Federal Society or Federalist Society through the Heritage Foundation, all of this originalism and constitutionalism has merely been a mask that is hiding the fact that what they're doing is a war on the New Deal and the civil rights movement. And that's really what where we are. And they've been doing it for decades. And Trump, although he is clearly unique and he's clearly an exacerbator of already existing divisions and the worst qualities of American business culture and culture at large, he's nonetheless a culmination of the work that has been done or began really since Reconstruction, if we want to go that far, right?
It's really the American conservative movement really dates to the attempt to reverse Reconstruction.
Agreed.
That's where it comes from.
Agreed.
And that's when the term was invented. The term American conservative is post-Civil War.
Right.
Absolutely aimed at the attempt by the North, and especially by U.S. Grant, to give for the federal government to give rights to the freed slaves.
Absolutely. Because what are they conserving? They're not conserving the environment, right? They're conserving the way things were prior to when all those liberals in the 1960s, those darn hippies, did all their nasty little expansion of rights, and going farther back in the 1860s, the original expansion of rights to African American slaves. So that's what we're dealing with, and what I want to do is sort of plant these seeds. There are practical uses, I think, for what I'm gonna get into, but really it's more about planting seeds for trees that I'll probably never sit in the shade of. But that's what we got. That's what we're up against. We're up against at least 80, if not 120 years of attacks on the expansion of rights. And so the Ninth Amendment, I think, gets us a lot of what the left wants, a lot of what the left has been arguing about and saying we deserve this, we deserve that, universal health care, as well as even a living wage. It's not going to be easy, and I'll admit that the theories are still in the workshop phase, but I believe that the Ninth Amendment has the force, both rhetorically in the battle for for minds, propaganda, as well as actual legal arguments to be made when we are trying to defend or attack certain actions by this government, this regime.
Right. Beautiful. So my understanding basically is the Ninth Amendment and also the 10th, which is somewhat redundant with the Ninth, but slightly more nuanced. It comes to mind immediately. I read yesterday that there's going to be a constitutional challenge against the National Labor Relations Board, which has already been through the courts. But, and of course, they're also going to challenge the right to gay marriage again. And but the Ninth Amendment basically says, if I am not too overstated, although it is very short. I mean, it's really, it's shorter than the First Amendment. I think the Ninth Amendment is the shortest amendment. If it's not in just because it's not in the Constitution or in the first 8 amendments, doesn't mean that you don't get it.
Exactly.
If it's not there, it's yours, not prohibited.
Exactly. If it hasn't been expressly given to the government, then it's retained by the people. And here's the interesting thing that I've been thinking about. One way to put what's going on here. Donald Trump is essentially evoking unenumerated powers, which is a thing that doesn't actually exist. And he's using those unenumerated powers that don't really exist to trample on the people's unenumerated rights, which do exist and have a constitutional guarantee in the Ninth Amendment. That's what's happening. He's taking, he's sort of I dare you to stop me when it comes to the power that he's wielding. I dare you to stop me is really the essence of this regime. And sometimes he'll cite laws, usually they're bogus. And now when it comes to sending the National Guard, as far as I know, he's not really citing. He hasn't invoked the Insurrection Act, which would be one way to go around the Posse Comitatus Act, which basically says that the federal government is not allowed to get into local policing. He's not even doing that. It's actually, and I predicted that he would, and the irony is that I'm wrong, but it's because it's worse than I thought. He's not even trying to make an argument that this is constitutional. And, I haven't really heard, I don't know about you, but I have barely been hearing any conservatives talking about, well, this is what the founders intended. They seem to have completely dropped that pretense now that the mask is pretty much off, that it was all BS. I don't want to curse. It was all BS in the first place, right? And so you're welcome. So that's where we are.
Right. And there is one founder who would have possibly endorsed what Trump is doing, and that's Hamilton. Hamilton in 1791 wrote a report called the Report on Manufactures, which basically said that the federal government should function in service of business. And that document had a mirror image in 1971, from 1791 to 1971, with the Powell memorandum. It was written by Lewis Powell, who was a lawyer hired by the Chamber of Commerce to write a document, a manifesto, saying that the federal government should exist for the pleasure of the corporations. And Nixon then put Lewis Powell on the Supreme Court, where he helped kill every attempt to restrict corporate spending in elections, culminating in Citizens United, which was after his time.
Right.
But he said Lewis Powell set the groundwork for it.
Right.
I suspect that Hamilton would have supported, although I think Hamilton would have been appalled by Trump. I don't think any of the founders would have been able to emotionally handle Donald Trump. I mean, it's just a 10 or 20 steps too far. But nonetheless, theoretically, Hamilton's a monarchist.
He is the tyrant that they warned about. There's even a line, I'll find it maybe later, and there's a line that almost sums up Trump perfectly, that Hamilton, I believe, was I think it was in a letter, I forget to whom, where he was essentially saying, here's one of the major threats to this republic. It's a man, and the description almost fits Trump to a T. The only thing that doesn't fit is that he talks about military accomplishments. So bone spurs aside, everything else, and it really was a character or a psychological profile. It's more than just some sort of political circumstances, or no, he gives a very accurate description of Trump's psychological profile, and it's insane that the constitutionalists are cheerleading it.
George III was not the sanest guy that ever lived, so they did have experience with a pretty wacky tyrant. But go ahead, Steve Caruso, and then Dorothy Reich.
Yeah, well, the preamble of the Constitution, all this stuff on its face is for the good of the people. Promote the general welfare. Pete Pekarsky has been on this program before. You've worked with him, Harvey. He's worked with Bob Petrakis in fighting the results of the 2004 elections. He says at least 4 times the right to vote is stated in the Constitution. The 15th Amendment, it says the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged. What are they doing now? You've got lines going on. You got people being denied their identities. This whole thing is tyranny by a few unjust people. You got people in Georgia getting kicked off the rolls or saying that they're not allowed to vote. I'm questioning it, so they automatically take them off. Where's the justice in that? Where's the court? Where's the court hearing? Where's the affidavit? Where's the, it's all trumped up BS. But
right. Well, this court is basically on the other side. This court has done everything. Well, these 6, the 6 so-called conservatives, have done everything in their power to restrict the right to vote. Before them, Rehnquist, who was Nixon made Chief Justice, he got his start denying people the right to vote, and John Roberts has a horrible history of doing the same thing. Thanks, Steve. Dorothy Reich, go ahead, Dorothy. Hello, Dorothy. We always have trouble unmuting you. But so this idea of the right to vote. Yeah, it's good you mentioned, Sam, that it is in the Constitution. It was not enumerated in the original document. It was
okay. I'm unmuted.
Go ahead, Dorothy.
So, first of all, interesting that we could thank our friend Ralph Nader.
Yes.
For the Powell Memorandum, because this is in response to his lawsuits that were costing corporations all this money.
Right.
Another reason to hate Ralph Nader besides what he did in Florida.
Well, I don't, so
Running as
that's
a
a different
Green.
story.
So I have two reasons to hate Ralph Nader. From what I see, I don't believe that these people think the amendments to the Constitution are part of the Constitution. That's the conclusion I come to when I see how they're behaving. I mean, look at this thing about birthright citizenship. Doesn't believe the amendments to the Constitution. And we have to remember also when the Constitution said that people's right to vote, they didn't mean you and me. They meant white Christian landowners. It was a very interesting, I've told this story before, but it's worth mentioning. John Nichols came to the Progressive Caucus, spoke to us, and he told everybody to stand up. We're all like, oh, please, this is so hokey. But we all stood up. And then he said, well, if you're a woman, sit down. You know, if you're not a Christian, sit down. By the time he went through all the little things, there was one guy standing, a guy named Ted Vail, who was a white Christian landowner whose family came over on the Mayflower. He was the only one of like 600 people who would have been allowed to vote when this country was founded. So I don't know, maybe I'm way off base, but I think these amendments to the Constitution do not hold the same value for these people as the action.
Well, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were an afterthought. They were not in the original Constitution because, as you say, the white landowners, they basically said, well, you know, it's assumed, but the public in the late 1780s said, if you don't have a Bill of Rights in there, we're not going to approve this Constitution. And that is absolutely 100% true. So Madison, as an afterthought, wrote the 10 amendments. And I have to say, he did an incredible job. The 10 amendments to the Constitution are spectacular. And of course, if Tom Paine had written them, we would have had Social Security. Tom Paine actually laid out, with Ben Franklin, by the way, you know, Tom Paine was nothing without Ben Franklin.
Well, I just want to hear what Samuel has to say about the weight of the amendments compared to the weight of the
What do you think,
Constitution itself.
Sure. No, thank you for that question. I think Trump doesn't give a damn about the law, right? So if that's essentially your point, then you're absolutely right. Well, I'm not sure who you mean when you say they. If you mean that the administration, then
the rabid right.
Say again.
The rabid right.
The rabid right. Yeah, I think the leaders of the rabid right know exactly what they're doing, and they don't care. And the masses, so to speak, MAGA, are so misinformed about the Constitution that essentially you're right. They might know, they might say to you, well, yeah, no, it is part of it. But what that really means in actual effect is almost meaningless, because at this point, we're essentially at the point where Trump's word is law, Trump's whim is law. And that's just the reality as far as I see it. But in terms of the irony, I guess the irony of citing these mostly, not all, Franklin, I believe, was the first one to create a abolitionist society, and he freed his two slaves at the end. Not exactly total, absolving of what he did before. But Thomas Paine was always against slavery. But for the most part, we know the vast majority were slave owners, and the vast majority were making a country that was mostly for rich white and Christian men. So how do we square that with
No, wait a minute.
Sure.
They were not Christian. The founder, the core of the founders, the core of the people who wrote the Constitution were Unitarians, agnostics, and atheists. They were not Christians. Washington called himself a Christian, but Washington was primarily an alcoholic. And the rest of them
weren't some other religion.
They were not. They were deists.
Yeah.
Some
deists
other religion. They were
very explicitly.
They were not Muslims. They were not Jews.
Yeah.
But these guys were not Christians.
Yeah.
And it's very important.
They were born Christian.
I would make it, it's a little bit more nuanced. I would say that I think Thomas Paine clearly literally became an outcast in society because he wrote The Age of Reason, which completely demolished Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, really demolished the idea of revealed religion. So he's on one side. I think Franklin was very close to him. He admitted that he did not believe in miracles or the divinity of Christ. I don't know how you
No,
can.
actually, Franklin, in his autobiography, said he believed in one miracle, and the miracle was he literally said this. He said the one miracle in his life was that he never got VD. But we'll leave it at that. Go ahead.
Well, that makes him more in line with maybe Donald Trump in that one regard. But,
Right.
but
we
you
don't
know,
know if it's true for Trump.
that's
That's the spice
or
and
for
something.
or for Franklin. But yeah, I do think, and this is what we were talking about yesterday, Harvey, and my dad, David Saltman. You know, I do think that Madison, I think Hamilton, although it's the evidence is a little bit harder to judge with him. But really the core writers, as you said, Madison, Jefferson, who really was more of the one who wrote the Declaration of Independence, Hamilton, and someone a little bit lesser known. Now I forget if it's George Mason or one other person. But when you read what they wrote, including their letters, you'll see that they often use Christian or religious sounding language like providence, creator. Hamilton went a little bit farther, and invoked Christianity a little bit more. But a lot of it, this is another theory I have that's related to the Ninth Amendment theory. I believe that what was really going on, and to essentially agree with you, Harvey, that they really were not Christian. They were certainly not practicing Christians. Washington was apparently a practicing Christian, at least.
Well,
you know,
Washington would show up in church,
yeah, right.
and he would leave early. No one else in America was allowed to leave church early, but
Fair enough. Fair
Washington
enough.
used to just get up and walk out. So there
Yeah,
you
it's
go.
a bit speculative to know exactly what's going on in their hearts and minds. But what I do think the evidence is pretty clearly shows that Jefferson, Franklin to a lesser degree, but Madison, who's considered the father of the Constitution, would couch natural rights in Christian or at least religious sounding language, and then in order to prop them up to a unassailable or inalienable level, so to speak, and then they worked tirelessly to create a separation between church and state.
Yes.
So what that is a way of sort of kind of having your cake and eating it too, and of course finding a way to compromise, because just to be fair, certain people like John Jay and Patrick Henry were devout Christians. So we can't say that none of the founding fathers were. But
Right.
to your point, John Jay, and especially Patrick Henry, were far less involved in writing the specific words that became the Constitution. And
Right.
So we have that.
Well, let's give Betty. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Let's give Betty and then Carmen. Betty. You're muted. Unmute, and Carmen. Go ahead, Betty. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to go back to a word that Samuel used early on, and that is sacred. You're talking about sacred rights, and I think it's a crucial word in any topic we're talking about. And I hope we can find some way to religicize it. Yeah. And the phrase, what is the phrase, the larger context of the nature's rights, or the nature's, you were talking about that, Samuel. Do you remember the larger phrase?
Natural rights?
Well, yeah, okay. And the whole, another time it's used in the Declaration of Independence at the very end, when we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Right.
And I don't know how many people on this call know who Matthew Fox is, but he says one of the core problems that is keeping us in these, it comes down to, we've lost our sense of the sacred. And that's why we're in global warming right now. That's why we're raping and looting nature as well as other people. And I think it is just such a crucial dimension that is left out and is
I think you're
warped by the Christian nationalism and the fundamentalists of all sorts.
Absolutely.
The dimension of the dementia. That's what we're involved here. But very good point, Betty.
This is a battle of the heart and soul of the United States of America and of humanity. There's no doubt
Yes.
about it. A return to, I would say, maybe I misunderstood what you said, but I would say I don't want to undo the language of sacred. I think in a way, what I described before about what Madison, let's focus on Madison. What Madison did, I think, was actually find a way for religious people and non-religious people to talk about something that is extremely important to everyone, natural rights, without getting into the weeds of, well, my God is better than your God, or my God's better than your non-God. And so in a weird way, it's sort of an arena in which anyone with a different worldview can enter, and yet they're still sort of speaking the same language. Whereas a lot of times, some of the problem with what's so difficult about having certain conversations with people is that we're speaking different languages because we're coming from completely different worldviews. So I think it's actually brilliant in that regard that you can use providence, creator, sacred, that language without having to actually be a Christian, and you can still have the same regard for the people's natural rights.
Well, you got to remember also Jefferson's use of the word creator was really a deist thing, because the Puritans and the hardcore Christians believed, as they still do apparently, that there was a God, a deity, an all-power deity that stays with us every day and watches everything we do, in the here and now. Creator is a term that says basically there was a divine force that created the universe, but then left, and has not been in our face all these years. And that's very much where Jefferson was. Jefferson, by the way, was not at the Constitutional Convention. He was in Paris.
Ambassador to France, right?
He was in Paris at the time,
avoiding VD as well,
stripping Sally Hemings. But that's a whole other story. Who needs to be?
He was in constant correspondence with Madison and others, and was.
Yeah, I understand, but he was still 3 months away. So
he was not there. Right.
He was not there. But Madison and he were very much on the same page.
Right.
Even though he was 6'1" and Madison was 5'4". Carmen Rodriguez, please go ahead, Carmen.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't restarted my computer in a while or something. Anyway, a few different things. It's really good. Somebody put in the chat, this is once every 2 weeks?
We will not meet next. We're pretty much weekly, but we missed the Monday holidays. So next week is Labor Day, and we won't meet.
Okay, and yeah, I'm in Alameda County, California, the first county alphabetically in California. And yeah, we have this, just to let people know, maybe they already know. I know Call for Change, which might be in conjunction with Mobilize Us, will start calling phone banking on September 6th, as per Sylvia Russell, in regard to Proposition 50.
Is that the one to do the gerrymandering? Proposition 50?
It's yes, in regard to redistricting.
Right.
And I've already gotten 2 things in the mail, one on Friday of last week and one today telling me to vote no on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if both Texas and California redistricting come to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will uphold the redistricting in Texas and kill it in California.
Oh, I didn't know they could select.
They can do anything they want. I would not be surprised if that happens. And I am dying, as I mentioned, to get a pro-solar ballot issue on the special election. I don't know if we can be able to.
Where I live in the southern part of the county that I live in, we're also voting on one hospital thing. So anyway, there will be 2 things on the ballot. And I will also be a voting place worker, but which I usually am. Although next year might be really, really, really a lot of work with if there's no mail-in and no voting machines. Also, someone I'm not sure if it's anyway. Someone mentioned about the person who wrote the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights to the Constitution.
Yeah.
He did a really, really great job. The one thing though is that a lot of ultra right-wing conservatives, and even a few who are not, some who are not, they always cite the Second Amendment as for having
Right. And I was going to say that they completely misinterpret the Second Amendment. The right that the security of a free state, right, depends a well-regulated militia.
Right.
That's the first phrase. A well-regulated, not right away means if you're going to have a gun, you got to be in the militia. For God's sakes, being necessary to the security of a free state. You have to have a reason to have a militia. So you got to be in the militia, and then the militia has to prove its value to democracy. After that, then you've got the right to a gun. None of these people pay attention to the first part of the Second Amendment, which is clear as a bell. If you're not in the militia, you don't have a right to a gun. Come on. Where did that come from? It's really infuriating. I support the Second Amendment. If you need, I mean, I'm anti-gun. I'm generally a pacifist, but if you have to have a militia, then you can have a gun. But the security of the free state is actually threatened by all these lunatics running around with a gun, claiming the Second Amendment when they're not in a militia. It's infuriating.
Very good point. Yeah, I think that part gets skipped over, and maybe they skip over that on purpose.
Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. Can I make a quick point to that?
Yeah.
The original understanding of the Second Amendment was that the founding fathers were afraid of a standing army in peacetime.
Yes.
That was one of their greatest fears. Ironically, only a year or two later, they then established a standing army in peacetime. So clearly, there's a lot of disagreement among the founding fathers.
Well, they did that to collect taxes, and that was Washington and Hamilton.
Shays' Rebellion kind of played a role. Yeah. So right. So one of the things I've noticed, and again, this is somewhat of a speculative theory, but I think I'm right, is that it almost seems like the conservative playbook is to say exactly the opposite of the truth. And they say it strongly enough, they say it, with enough confidence, and they say it repeated enough that it becomes a mantra and it becomes nearly impossible to battle. And this is a perfect example. The entire battle about the Second Amendment is regulation. Literally, the first word, or I guess the second word after
well-regulated,
is well-regulated. And somehow the liberals who want to regulate guns are considered the anti-constitutionalists. And the ones who claim to be the originalists, who we know, like you said before, we are the seancers of the founding fathers' true beliefs, and we're the scholars who read all their correspondence, and we know what they completely ignore that plain language and ignore what I said before about the underlying fears that prompted the Second Amendment. So it's completely backwards. And this goes to what we were talking about before about empathy, empathy being a sin. Again, you say it strongly enough, you get, and you say it in a way that says, they want you to think that empathy is really good. In reality,
Jesus, what a huckster Jesus was.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Jesus is the huckster, not these a-holes on Christian televangelical networks, right? And so it's this new thing about red pill, and it kind of fits in with the sort of whole conspiracy theories. It makes people who are perhaps, let's say, not as well educated, perhaps ignorant, perhaps feeling disenfranchised. It makes them feel like they're part of the in group. That's how you can take things that are completely backwards and somehow convince 75 to 100 million people that it's
Well, for the right wing, the male-dominated right wing, it's not a well-regulated militia; it's a well-hung militia, and that's a whole other world. So, LYNN FEINERMAN, please, thank you for that, Betty, and Carmen. LYNN FEINERMAN, then Dorothy, then Mickey, then Alex. Go ahead, Lynn. We're going to go through to 4:20 California time today, so let's just keep at it. If you're good, Sam, if you can stay with us.
Sure, of course.
LYNN FEINERMAN, go ahead.
Yes, thanks for the comparative things on both the Second Amendment and also the writing of the actual Constitution and who thought what and so forth about religion, because I think you see very clearly that the extreme right is very concerned about convincing everybody that this is a Christian nation and was founded as a Christian nation. And that is, it subsumes the whole issue of othering and belonging, and who belongs and who is other. And so that also runs the entire immigration fiasco under the right-wing aegis. So thank you for all of that. And I just thought that it all boils down to idolatry. And so I thought I would share, just for a little light moment, something from George Carlin. He said, religion easily has the best boop boop story of all time. There's this old guy in a corner somewhere with a beard, and he sees everything you do. And if he doesn't like what you do, he's going to send you to a terrible place, a place where you will burn and burn and burn. But he loves you. Oh, he loves you.
Yeah, right.
And he needs money.
Well,
Creator of the universe.
Robin Williams did a magnificent routine, and he pretended to be a far-right televangelist. And he says, the word audit does not appear in the Bible. So there you go.
Can I just say one thing about
yeah.
this idea of being founded on a Christian nation? Again, here's another perfect example of the right saying the exact opposite of what the truth is, while they claim to be the ones who are the scholars of what the founding fathers said, did, and wanted, and wrote about, and so on. The Treaty of Tripoli, signed by John Adams, I believe he was the third president. Second, right? That's what I said. Right. So there was a Treaty of Tripoli. I won't get into the details behind it, but essentially it was with the Barbary pirates in northern Africa. And Article 11, I have right here, says, this is John Adams, founding father, also heavily involved in the writing of the Constitution, not as much as Madison and some of the others, but still pretty close. President of the United States says, as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Full stop.
Right.
So what are we doing here? And actually, going back before, John Adams was also slightly more on the other side of the religious practicing Christian. He was, in fact, the practicing Christian. And yet he himself specifically stated that this nation is not founded on the Christian religion. It's sort of mind-boggling that we are where we are when the truth is so clearly out there.
Well, the founder
used to find it.
The founder, who was most explicitly Christian, although he wasn't an evangelical or anything like that, was Washington. He made no bones, and he did go to church, even though he walked out. The other guys, Franklin wrote a whole thing about how a friend of his twisted his arm and made him go to church. And Franklin said he was there like an hour or two. He's, forget this, and he went home. So, Washington was asked by a synagogue in Truro, Rhode Island.
Yep.
Hey, saying basically, hey, are we okay here? And Washington wrote a very powerful letter saying, listen, this country, you are, we're good. I don't care if you're Jewish or whatever, you're fine here. And
I literally read that yesterday, and
yeah.
I thought I had it up in one of my 500 tabs, but I don't. But that's exactly right. He said this country gives no. I'm going to not get the words exactly right, but something that gives no sanction to oppression and gives no, no life to religious discrimination, something like that. He was adamant about
probably drunk or stoned. Washington was the biggest brewer in America, and he also raised tons of hemp. There's no evidence that he or Jefferson smoked it, but they wrote back and forth about hemp, talking about what a great crop it was, because they hated raising tobacco. Tobacco is extremely difficult to raise, whereas hemp, you just throw the seeds in the ground, and then in the fall you get an 8-foot plant and a 10-foot federal agent. But other than that,
it could be used for almost anything, right? Paper, clothing.
It was the second.
It was a
It was the second
disruptive.
most important cash crop in America.
It was a disruptive technology in a sense, right? That's
Yes,
probably
it
why
was.
some people didn't want to.
But there's no evidence that these guys smoked it. Although there is a hint that Lincoln may have smoked it. It's a whole convoluted story. It's not particularly convincing. But I will say that Lincoln was very clear that he did not believe in the resurrection. And as we all know, I think most people know, Jefferson wrote a whole version of the New Testament. I've actually held an edition. Jefferson was such a show off. He wrote this book, the New Testament, and he divided into four sections. And he had English, French, Latin, and Greek, all simultaneous in his version of the New Testament, which very explicitly excluded all references to any miracles or the divine birth.
100%.
That was Jefferson.
Yep.
Dorothy Reich, please, then Mickey, then Alex.
Hi. So I wanted to just before everybody leaves announce that on September 1st, which is next Monday, Divisible and is holding another No King's Day protest. The theme of this one is labor, and you can find an event protest near you by going to Mayday Strong Mobilize, and you scroll down and you can put in your zip code. You can find all the protests that are near you. And last time we did this, we had 5 million people out, but we really need 15 million people. That's the tipping point, 3.5% of the population we need to have. That's what the scholars say, that once that many people are opposing a regime, the regime is over. So
well, then the question is, if you get 15 million people, who is he going to attack next? I mean, the last time we had 5 million people for No King's Day was the biggest simultaneous demonstration in American history, and 4 days later he bombed Iran. So if we have 15 million people, who's he going to bomb this time?
Maybe Canada? I don't know. But we need to be out. We
Mexico
need to be
City.
peaceful. We need to have a show of force, and maybe that will wake up some Democrats. But it's going to make it harder for him to do this kind of stuff if 15 million people are opposing him and are willing to go out in the street to say so. So we really need to get out there. We need to make our voices heard. We also need to try to reach out to our representatives and tell them to get some backbone. This is really so frustrating and upsetting that they're just sitting there.
Yeah.
Like,
all right. All right, September 1st. Is that Labor Day?
Is Labor Day. It's in conjunction with all the Labor Day events.
Oh yeah, Labor Day
happen. And so and they're saying, which is probably true, that if we can get in coalition with labor, that's a big move in our,
well,
forward.
The left.
They just outlawed the NLRB. Did you see that?
Yes, I did see that. Mentioned it.
It's insane.
Well, there you go. We've been talking about an alliance with. We've been talking about an alliance with labor since the Vietnam War. So let's see if we can finally do it. It'd be great.
All right. Well, everybody should please go to that website and find a protest near you. They're only an hour or two, and you can get back and still have your barbecue or whatever the hell you want to do. But
okay, that's
Harvey,
good.
I expect to get a picture of you at a protest.
Okay, we can do that.
I mean,
if they let me.
Many of them in New Jersey, God knows.
No, I was at No King's Day. I went to the No King's Day demonstration in downtown Teaneck at 10 a.m. And somebody was complaining that had been sabotaged. It was originally supposed to be at 1 p.m. Somebody sent out a notice at 10 a.m. 300 people showed up. So I went there for a while. I went and worked out. I came back at 1 a.m. and there were 400 people. So it was great right here in downtown Teaneck. So there you go. Thank you, Dorothy.
Yeah, we had 300 people in Topanga.
Yeah.
And there were tens of thousands of people in bigger demonstrations in downtown and in Santa Monica, all over. But there were, I think, 1,800 demonstrations.
But I just had a big argument yesterday with a bunch of people, and they're talking about the bombing of Iran, and I basically said the bomb Iran, his target in bombing Iran was not Iran, it was the No King's Day March, because all anybody was talking about was how nobody showed up for his pathetic birthday party, but 5 million
That was
people.
amazing.
And so he had, as Trump is the master of doing, he had to change the topic, and so he bombed Iran. So if we get 15 million people out, who's he going to bomb? Mexico City, maybe? Montreal?
Mexico, he's in Venezuela. He's got the ships there already.
And this, when you go into the other room, you can put this in this.
Mickey, you're on air there. Did you want to say something?
I did.
Go ahead.
While you were all becoming wonderful history professors.
Where'd you go?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't know. I didn't touch anything and it unmuted and muted by itself. Anyway,
go
must
ahead.
be Trump. He must be hacking me. So on MSNBC, you just had a whole thing on Trump that he's calling for, and I heard this yesterday, no mailed-in votes, no voting machines, and only use paper votes. I swear the guy he's bipolar, you know?
At least. I think there's more than two polls there. But we'll see. The other
Putin told him.
Yeah. Did you know in the middle of when all those people came over from Europe, the leaders of Europe came over, and in the middle of meeting with them, Trump called Putin and talked to him. Talked to him for 40 minutes.
He had to get directions from his boss.
Well,
exactly.
There are two ways that Putin owns Trump. Number one, both Putin and Trump use the services of Jeffrey Epstein. Sorry, I'm eating a nut here. Putin was very well aware and in touch personally with Jeffrey Epstein. And I'm sure that Putin has all the evidence you could ever want for Trump's dalliances with these underage girls. And the other one, and nobody talks about this, but they're going to have to at some point, Jeffrey Epstein was the money launderer for Trump. When the Soviet Union fell, all these mobsters were in the gulag. They came out and they took over the whole country, and they laundered their money. Trump was, the perfect guy. He was a bankrupt, corrupt landowner. He had all his daddy's real estate, but he didn't have any cash, and he was bankrupt, 4 or 5 times. And so the Russians came to him with their rubles, and he laundered their money. And I'm sure Putin has every receipt from every one of those transactions. And Jeffrey Epstein handled a lot of those transactions. That's how he got so rich. Him and Les.
They bought the apartments. They bought all those apartments at Trump Tower.
Right. They did buy all those apartments.
Right. One guy bought 5 apartments in Trump Tower at one moment.
But they bought Trump's stuff down in Florida too.
Well, there's a great story about that, which we've told before. He and Jeffrey Epstein were allegedly great, great, great friends. And Epstein was going to buy a mansion in South Florida for $36 million. And he called his buddy, Donald, the real estate maven, to come over and walk the property with him to get his advice. And then Trump turned around and went behind his back and bought the mansion for $40 million.
Then resold it for $80 million.
No, 100. And that's the story of how it turns in. I think, Dorothy, you got the other 20. Trump turned around and sold it to one of these Russian guys who was laundering his money.
I think the Russian guy was either an associate or fronting for Oleg Deripaska. I think one of the top, what do you call it? The oligarchs under.
Right.
Yeah.
But Putin knows Putin owns all those guys. He has all the records of Epstein laundering Trump's money.
There were lots of stories in the beginning, 2015, about Trump going to Moscow and trying to meet with Putin so that he could, in fact, get investments so he could build a Trump Tower
in
Moscow. But he never got it. Putin never gave it to him.
Well, the problem
And-
was they kept putting the R backwards. He couldn't figure it out.
Well, bottom line, the story was that Putin called Trump a useful idiot.
Oh yeah, well that we know. Yeah, that was Lenin's term, you know.
Yeah.
We
And
call
not
him that too.
Nikolai. Yeah.
Yep. So
Okay. Yep. Here we go. It's we got 15 minutes. This is fun. Alex Williams, go ahead, and then Carmen again, and then Ruth.
Can you hear?
Ruth.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, yeah. I think there's way too much focus on Trump. I mean,
Well, we like, but you know, he keeps.
I mean, it's fun and all.
But every
But,
day he does something else, and he's
well,
really.
that's the
He's
point.
following directions.
That's the point. While we're having funning with him and all like that, he's just the people that are really running the show are slowly walking us into fascism. We're already
well,
there.
There is a sense at this point that he is actually running the show. I mean, he's
And then
obviously
He's not running the show.
he's like
He's-
yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's not. He's
Well,
like the
so who is?
buffoon they put out in front for all of us to laugh at, and he don't care because he's crazy anyway, and because we know he was a criminal from way back when.
What do you mean was?
Well, still is, but I'm saying, you know, at some point, somebody in power said, you know, we need this guy to do our big stealing of the country. Because there's no way the old Republican Party would allow somebody as crooked as him to be, they forced Nixon out back in the
Well,
day.
it's not that he's so crooked. It's just he's not slick about it. And
Yeah,
Nixon, you know, Nixon
well,
lost.
Nixon was crooked too, but I mean,
W. Bush lost it too. The only guy that was the most capable guy that the big money right wing had in the presidency was Bush one. He was nobody's fool, but Reagan was out of his depth. But you know, Nancy took over. Nancy ran the country for a couple of years. I would argue she was one of our greatest presidents, but she definitely ran the country. But Ronnie couldn't. Ronnie didn't know what was going on, and W was over his head. The only one really up for it had been Bush one. But you know, Trump. The big question with Trump is how long is the mega money going to put up with a guy who's so clearly unstable and unpredictable? You know, that's because they don't like uncertainty. Big money does not like uncertainty.
No.
And how long are they going to put up with this? Because he is definitely doing significant damage to the global economy. Oh my God. And this is something that the J.P. Morgans and John D. Rockefellers didn't like. That's why they initially were very, very opposed to Teddy Roosevelt. But Teddy Roosevelt was so smart and really knew what he was doing, and he was not the unstable kind of guy that they thought he was. And so, you know, they tolerated him, although he was shot, but he survived that. And you know, Taft was really the kind of guy that the big money liked, and Herbert Hoover was but I just wonder how much longer the serious billionaires are going to put up with this guy. Well, so we'll watch it. Thank you for that, Alex. So it's a good question, but at this point, he has sucked so much oxygen out of the air that, you know, he is going to be a point.
that's his job.
Yeah,
that's his job.
The distractor
You know,
in chief. Yeah.
And while he does that, yeah.
Dr. Ruth, you hadn't spoken yet. Where'd you go? Ruth Strauss. Go ahead, Carmen, and then Breaky, you had a hand, and Dave Saltman, come in and correct your son here. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this wasn't or okay, two questions. One is Solartopia. You said at one point that the Supreme Court, that with the redistricting, it could go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could rule, yes, Texas can do redistricting, but California couldn't, and I don't really understand that. And then
nobody's going to understand it. They'll just do it. It won't make any sense.
Okay.
There'll have be no legal background for it, but they'll just find a way to do it.
Okay. And then somebody they're mentioning these other people like Stephen Miller and then
Oh,
Laura Loomer both seem to have a tremendous amount of influence in terms of the president. I mean, way, I feel, more influence than they should have. And they haven't even had to go before the Senate for Senate hearings.
right. Well,
Um,
these guys are really crazy. Actually, the most interesting headline I read last week is there apparently speculation that Melania has had enough and that she's going to go live in Europe. And she did apparently write this letter to Putin. She may be affected by all the children getting killed in Ukraine. That was the implication. That would be really interesting. She clearly can't stand the guy, and so
yeah,
who
I very
knows?
seldom see her around
Never, we
him.
never see her. So who
She
knows?
was to the one side of him on the whatever his parade day and a few
Right.
other times.
Well,
But
she was
other than
wearing
that,
also the weirdest hat for any first lady has ever worn, but nonetheless, we'll see. Dave Saltman and then John Brakey. Dave hasn't spoken yet, John, and then we'll come to you, and then we'll keep moving on here. We only got 9 more minutes.
I just comment on the effect on the other billionaires of Trump's madness. I don't think at least in my mind, it's not a done deal. And I've been following all the economic, geniuses, their opinions, and they're all over the place. But it seems that there are two elements here. One of them is the tariffs are a disaster for working people, but they're very good for the US government because they're all taxable. And a lot of that money goes right into the Treasury Department. So it's not necessarily, as far as the deficit goes, and things like that, not necessarily let's call it a statistical nightmare. That's number one thing. Number two is, as long it's, at least this is my impression, and Krugman seems to agree with this. As long as the stock market is okay, the billionaires will be okay because that's basically where their wealth is to a great degree. And the stock market is now making, and the billionaires and Trump and everybody, and this is affecting the nuclear issue and everything else we're talking about. It's all about AI now, artificial intelligence. That is a massive. It's either the biggest balloon in the history of Wall Street, or it's going to be the new railroad.
Right.
And I point out that at the time of railroads, the smart investment was not to buy railroad stock; it was to buy shovels and
Right.
Levi Strauss overalls.
Right.
That's where the smart money was. So I don't know the answer to these things, but I'm just saying where you're saying why are the other billionaires putting up with this? I think that Trump has probably become the richest man in the world now. He and Putin are probably number one and number two. And remember, he was bankrupt just 15, 20 years ago.
Oh,
That's
many times.
stunning.
Yeah.
And that's all I got. By the way, the new kid is fantastic.
Oh, stop it. Thanks, though. Thanks. I needed that. Oh, you were
I
referring
will
to me? I'm
point out, by
sorry.
the
I'm
way,
sorry.
the European Postal Service has announced it will no longer deliver packages to the United States because of the tariffs. They can't deal with it. And there's a great sentence I underlined, where the European Postal Service was hoping that the American government would have a workable mechanism for collecting the tariffs because they don't now. And they passed, there you go. You can't get a package from the Postal Service because they can't deal with the tariffs. But the Americans can't deal with the tariffs. But until the 16th Amendment and the income tax, the United States got its revenue from the customs house. That's how Chester Arthur became president. He was the head of the customs house. That's where the government's income came from. Anyway, they were taxing all the cocaine that was coming into the country. Breaky, go ahead, and then Mickey Leader. We're almost out of time. John Breaky, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add great discussion. I want to add to let people know that I've posted some really important things in the chat. And one of it is I'm on Substack for the last year now, and that's where I'm posting everything. And there is a particularly something that somebody should see about techno-fuelism. And I have posted it on the chat, so people should save it. And also, please sign up to my Substack. It's free, okay? And that way you'll get a regular, because, I am coming out with an article that I shared with Harvey that it's still not done because I'm adding pictures to it, but ballots over bullets and what's going to happen. And then something I'm also working on is I lived in Mexico for 10 years, and they have a value added tax. It's 16%. They do not have a really good income tax. That's how they get the money in. They are now, Trump is changing and giving these big tax breaks to the super rich, and he's going to wind up taxing the people of lower class and middle class on food, because it really is incredible what's going on and how they're doing this. And that's where the 2026 election, the only way that I think that he can win is if they steal it, because it's
Well, no,
going
they'll buy
to get
it. They'll buy
worse.
it. They don't steal it anymore. They just
It's there's a lot of different ways, and I would have to agree that in this last election, they may have not stole it through the ballot box. They did it through algorithms and micro-targeting and using influencers. But of course, the statistics on these 7 swing states is incredible.
Yes, it is, literally.
And that has to be questioned. I'm not a
But when you
denialist.
do that,
I'm not saying it was rigged, but like I said, we
no,
should
it
never
was
have
purchased.
to wonder.
It was purchased. We're going to deal with that in 2 weeks. Everybody,
But
we
John
will not
Breaky,
meet. We will not
Substack,
meet.
that's how you can find me.
What's that again, John?
John Breaky at Substack.
Okay.
And this thing on techno-fuelism, I believe nothing is fixed till you know why it broke. I spent a lot
Okay.
of time on research and understanding who are the movers and groovers and what
Okay.
they're doing.
All right.
And it's called the PayPal Mafia. And you're going to find a lot on that. Also in the Christocrats. It's incredible the coalition that has happened against us.
Well, sooner or later, it's going to have to go a different direction. So 418, thank you so much, Steve Caruso, for engineering. We will meet again in 2 weeks. We will do more on the amendments. Thank you so much, Sam and John, with Ken Bennett, Mimi, for your poem. Mayor Heidi, this has been another fabulous session. Mickey and then Steve will get the last word. Mickey, real quick, please, and then Steve Caruso.
Very quick, can you please post Substack John Breaky to all of us, because I can't copy. I have an iPhone. I can't copy the chats. Number 2, I have to add to it. DHL and a whole bunch of the delivery people are refusing to deliver anything from overseas to the US because of the tariffs. It's just too conflicting. So
No,
all of this is a disaster.
In true Trump fashion, he set up these tariffs, but not a mechanism to collect them. It's kind of like how he ran his casinos and why they went bankrupt. All right, you guys, everybody, John.
Can I just do a shameless plug real quick? I don't know how to raise my hand.
Go ahead.
So I just posted in the chat. I did my first podcast episode a couple weeks ago.
gallon and a half of
Called I Have a Theory About That. It's about the Ninth Amendment, and I'm gonna have another follow-up episode that continues the thread. So please check it out if you can.
All right, and come back in a couple of weeks and update us. Ask permission from your father. Steve Caruso, give us the last word, please.
Yeah,
Thank you,
AI is
Sam.
already crashing. The money, billions of dollars invested, is not giving any return. So watch Harry Shearer or listen to him talk about AI. He's got it all laid out from the news itself. It's just a big.
Well, I think, in retrospect, I think AI is going to turn out to be ay. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, everybody. Another great session. Really wonderful to be with all of you. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Go out, hit the streets with Dorothy Reich. And maybe when we return, the government will have fallen and Dave Saltman can give us the inside story. All right, you guys, take care. See you, everybody. No
Everyone,
news.
take care.
We'll see you in Solartopia.
Sam, send us your information, will you? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
No nukes, everybody.